Absolutely, and I'm sure that resounds with most Ghanaians. I'd be surprised to see any Ghanaian going through the current difficult times who disagrees with the diagnosis and, if you like, pronouncements that were made by both the former Honorable Finance Minister, Honorable Settegbe, and of course, President Mahama. They both spoke truth to power, if not truth to the nation.
Why did you say that?
So I think at a high level, if you look at where they both headed, it's a general conclusion in the country that this government has been an abysmal failure. That what we traded for, as my friend, the Upper West Regional Chairman, Regional Communication Officer would say, is we traded a pregnant goat for, if you like, a very stale old goat, he-goat. You know, the standard of living in Ghana now is very low. The cost of living is super high, and they are all substantiated by a lot of the nuisance taxes, which we have discussed severally on this forum. And I think both President Mahama and Honorable Settegbe took pains to explain to Ghanaians that there's a crystal clear difference. There's an ocean of blue water in terms of difference between the NDC's performance on the economy and the MPP's performance on the economy. And the long and short of it was to tie it right back to the high cost of living now through the nuisance taxes, the baller taxes, the increases in petroleum taxes, you know, the increases in the prices of goods and services using the Kinke test. Check a ball of Kinke now and a ball of Kinke when President Mahama handed over to Nana Akufo-Addo. And it was all down to fundamentally one or two things. You know, the main thing here was the fact that our debt is very high. And precisely because our debt, in a very unprecedented manner, I mean, imagine the NDC handed over to the MPP at a total debt threshold of what? About 120. They say 122 billion. So let's give them 122 billion. As we speak now, Senator, the total debt stock of the nation is 344 billion. A complete 242 billion more than they took over 5 years ago. And you're looking at 120 billion that was accumulated from Kwame Nkrumah all the way to JM. And JM can account for the over 50 billion that he added to the national debt through the many hospitals, many of which have been completed and these guys have locked up out of pure wickedness, through the many interchanges, the many roads, the many schools, the e-blocks, you know, and the stabilization of the currency at the time, as well as making sure we left a lot of money in if you like, in ESLA. We left some money in the stabilization fund, all of which this government has wiped out. Not only have they tripled, I mean, more than tripled our debt, they have also enjoyed, as President Mahama said, the largest share of our oil proceeds in history. Since we started getting oil out of the ground, they have taken a 60% share of that oil revenue. You know, the tax revenue they've had is more than we had. And yet, you cannot point to one single completed secondary school that this government has put in place. Not one single road. Even in the year of roads was cancelled by the same people who declared it the year of roads. You know, and this, not only have they wasted the revenue we've got, they've also borrowed more, and that borrowing has now saddled us with high interest payments. So much so that as we speak now, a large portion of our domestic revenue generated, you know, close to 90% of it is now gone towards debt servicing. No, Sana, this is explaining why we now have to increase taxes to be able to keep up with our ability to service those debts. And now these taxes have been increased when income of Ghanaians has remained stable, if not fallen because of inflation. It then means that Ghanaians' disposable income has come down. So the money you had to buy a ball of Kinke, it can now only buy 75% of a ball of Kinke. And so if the Kinke seller is not reducing increasing the price of Kinke, they are reducing the size of the ball of Kinke. And this is where the hardship is on Ghanaians. You know, you go to consume, they will tax you. You go to buy petrol, they will tax you. When you go to release waste, they will tax you for the baller as well. And that is exactly what President Mahama was talking about when he said it is the mismanagement of the economy that has led to the ballooning of our national debt, which has then also led to a high debt service ratio, or a high portion of our income going into debt service So now if you spend 90% plus of your raw tax revenue paying off the interest on your debt, you've only got 10% left to pay salaries. You've only got 10% left to also try to what? Invest in infrastructure. And you can see that the natural consequence of it is that the increase in public sector wages is stuck at a paltry, 4%? No infrastructure is going on. Anything that is borrowed, and serially, Honorable Adongo has said this, almost every year since 2017, we go to borrow $3 billion Euro bonds, and instead of using it for infrastructure, we divert it into kinky. Because the debt is so high that you simply borrow to pay back some of your interest and then for consumption, because the economy cannot even sustain it. So President Mahama was spot on when he said that it's pure mismanagement and the disingenuity of this government in attributing all of that to COVID. You know, anything you say, they say COVID. But then I do a simple test. How much did they get for COVID? They got $1 billion from the IMF, $100 million from World Bank. They took $100 million from the World Bank, $1 billion from the IMF, $10 billion from the Bank of Ghana. If you add up all of the COVID debt that they've incurred, it won't even exceed 14, 15 billion. Let's even give them 20 billion. But guess what? They have taken the debt from 120 to 344. So they themselves have increased it by 220 billion. So if you take that 20 billion out as COVID, what about the other 200 billion? Who is responsible for that? Was it a COVID issue? Absolutely no. And I think that we've already said on this platform some time back that as far back as December 2019, long before we heard of COVID, the World Bank, the IMF's debt sustainability analysis had already diagnosed Ghana as a high debt-stressed country. So the excuse of COVID is not neither here nor there. The base reason for what we are on is pure reckless and incompetent management of the economy, Senna.
But they dispute that whenever you raise it. They speak about the fact that if you look across the world, a lot of economies are suffering because of COVID, and you cannot take COVID out of the equation when you're talking about the state of Ghana's economy currently. That COVID is the biggest threat to the economy as we speak. You are saying that cannot stand?
To be honest, and that cannot stand at all. First and foremost, yes, we agree that COVID has been a challenge to many global economies, no doubt. However, Senna, there are a few tests that you can run. First and foremost, COVID is not the first incident in this world that has hobbled a lot of economies. You and I know that in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, Ghana was crippled. And Sategbe went to pains yesterday, for example, to emphasize the fact that at some point in 2012, 2013, we budgeted for oil price of over $90 a barrel and only got $35. That's 1/3 of what we wanted. We managed through. We had Ebola. We managed through. You know, we had Doomso, which the vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, himself compared to COVID. He said, COVID is their Doomso. Throughout that Doomso, we still managed to pull off 3.4% economic growth. With COVID alone, and we didn't get a peswa from out of the country to manage Doomso. So now you can check this, not a peswa. We found homegrown policies to resolve that whilst keeping the economy balanced. And we managed to pull off 3.4% when we were handing over to them. They took COVID, the economy. They claimed the economy was doing so well and was resilient. At the first sign of COVID, the economy was hobbled. But that tells you that they had always been talking the economy and not working the economy. They borrowed heavily, over 14 billion just for COVID. And in spite of that, we still recorded the first contraction in economic activity since 1983, Senna. For 37 years during military regime, through all the Kumipreku days where we were told things were hard, this country never recorded negative economic growth. These guys took it and they had all the resources. And you can see, look, they budget like $100 million for PPE for all the schools. Senna, go around the schools and show how many PPEs are there. Is it the Veronica buckets or the sanitizers that cost $100 million? All of that went down into the gaping hole of pure misapplication and theft. Now, to put, again, the point I was making is, look, If you quantify the total amount of COVID, it is nowhere near 10% of the amount of debt they have incurred in the last 5 years. Now, if Senna, let's even call it 20%. If 20% of your debt is responsible for the other 80%, then that 80% is suspicious. The other thing we have to know, Senna, is that COVID did not just come to Ghana alone. All our neighboring West African countries, none of them has incurred as much debt in the COVID period as we have incurred. None of them has incurred as much negative growth as we finished last year on the 0.4%. The first 3 quarters, we were in negative 3.2%. Little Benin, right here across the border, it's a smaller economy compared to us. They did almost 3%. Look around the West African region, our peers, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, none of them did worse than us. So that tells you that COVID did not hit us any more than it hit them. Ironically, Senna, we shut our borders to Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and Togo because we said that COVID had ravaged them and we didn't want that COVID to come to us because we were supposed to be what? A safe island. True? Now, if we were a safe island and we shut ourselves from those who were affected by COVID, and yet those who were affected by COVID did not see a massive increase in deficits compared to we, the safe island. They did not see a massive dip in productivity and GDP growth compared to we, the island. Then what exactly is the excuse for saying that we did better on COVID? They praise themselves on COVID and say we managed it very well and therefore the economy is still doing well. But then in the same breath, they did worse in what they claim they managed very well compared to those who didn't manage it well. How is it that, Senna, the man who took medicine is worse off than the man who did not take medicine for the same ailment? It just doesn't add up. The only explanation for this is the serial incompetence, the serial lying, and dishonesty to Ghanaians. And many Ghanaians now see it. The only people whose lives have changed is these people in government. Corruption, from left, right, and center. So I honestly do not buy this COVID excuse. If anybody thinks that COVID is a reason, they should tell us how much COVID has accounted for in terms of the hit on the economy, and then let us know the difference. What is that accounted for?
And you are saying all this is down to what you call expenditure on kenke, which means you're talking about consumption.
Oh, yes, Senna. That is absolutely the case. You see, at the point the NDC was leaving office, we had established a pattern where we were effectively only borrowing for infrastructure. So when we were borrowing for Terminal 3, they were making noise. When we were borrowing, and we're using smart borrowing, and I think I've explained this before, things like public-private initiative, you build, operate, and transfer, like the expansion of the Tema Harbor, like the Terminal 3. We built the Tuabu gas plant. We did all of this in a smart way that did not impact our debt. What these guys have done is engage in what you call lazy borrowing. Simply go and collect the money and come and put it in. Don't think outside the box. There are many of the infrastructure projects which could simply have been funded without borrowing. Now, this is the thing, Senna. There is not a single major infrastructure project that has happened since 2017. Since this government came into force, that they can use to account for the money that it's gone. Maybe the extra $100 million they borrowed to add to what GM had already done for Obujebi Lamte, but that is only about what? $100 million, roughly 500 million Ghana cedis. It's a tiny drop in the billions they've spent. If you look at Tema Interchange, it was fully funded by JM before he left. Pokwasi, it was fully funded by JM and it's included in JM's debt. Circle, fully funded by JM, included in JM's debt. The Kaneshi interchange, fully funded. The only interchanges that this government has tried to build are the Tamale interchange and the Takoradi interchange. So now you and I know that those are not included in our debt because they were supposed to be by barter with the Chinese. If you go to Takoradi, there's nothing there. Apart from the shovel that Nana Akufo-Addo used to break ground, it's still lying there. Nothing else has happened. If you go to Tamale, what they are calling an interchange is a massive mud brick. It's like a dump of concrete. It hasn't gone anywhere. So even if you grant all those, there is no further single infrastructure project that accounts for a lot of the debt they have. So there's no excuse, to be honest. You can't quite lay a finger on what exactly have they spent it on. No hospital, no single district hospital in 5 years, no single secondary school building toilets and poly tanks and 1 or 2 classroom blocks here and there. It doesn't count for much. So if you look at all of that, and you know that in your budget, it's either consumption or development expenditure, i.e. infrastructure spending. Now, if there is zero expenditure or next to zero infrastructure spending, then where else could it be spent except for consumption, Senna? And that is the bare truth. And the fact of the matter is, even if they deny that it's gone into consumption, the question then will be, so where is that money gone? And we know the evidence being the fact that you are debt stressed. Without borrowing, Senna, we cannot pay our debts. That's a fact. Anytime our debts are due, they go and borrow, use the new borrowing to pay some of the old borrowing plus the interest, and then our borrowing goes up. So it is a fact that all of the borrowing they have incurred is all into consumption, not productive expenditure that will return funds into the coffers and allow you to pay that debt back. And this is exactly where we are.
I listened to the MPP General Secretary yesterday attempt to respond to the issues that were raised by both former Finance Minister Seth Terkper and former President John Dramani Mahama. A few things he mentioned. He said, well, we've done planting for food and jobs, which has increased productivity in agriculture. We are paying teacher and nursing trainee allowances. We are also paying professional allowances to teachers. We are also doing one district, one factory. We've done one village, one dam. Those are areas that they spent money on, for which results can be seen. You are saying all those do not count, that this policy interventions that money has been spent on should not be considered as success stories for which these loans have gone into?
Senna, these people, I'm glad that they didn't mention free SHS this time round, because the last time the Deputy Finance Minister mentioned free SHS as one of the reasons for their debt.
No, in fact, they did mention as one of the things they are doing.
Oh, good. Now, this is where the disingenuity comes in, as we said. Even they themselves cannot be honest to tell you what they spend the money on. Okay, let's start from planting for food and jobs. If it is so successful, why did the Agric Minister only 2 months ago sign an authorization for import of maize into the country? If it is so successful, why did we have to import maize? Or the planting for food and jobs didn't include maize? If it is so successful, why are we importing tomatoes from Burkina Faso? Burkina Faso is closer to the desert than we are. And yet, for some reason, they are able to irrigate their deserted land, and produce tomatoes and import it to us. Why is it there was a Joy News story the other day that people selling maize in Techiman have been complaining of a lack of maize? They have to cross to Cote d'Ivoire to get maize. So you see that the noise they make about the successful planting for food and jobs is a complete sham. In fact, the Agric Minister himself confirmed it by saying their fertilizers were carried across to Burkina Faso on donkeys. How is it the case that a successful program has inputs that are being moved into Burkina Faso on donkeys? So is it the case that the tomatoes from Burkina Faso are being cultivated with planting for food and jobs fertilizer from Ghana? Is it the case that we were so successful in our maize cultivation, yet last year we had to borrow grains from the ECOWAS Grains Board just to feed our students in the secondary schools? Senna, it is not about how much you have put in the soup. It is about how the soup tastes like. If you come and tell me I've put akrantie, I've put fish, I've put goat meat, I've put beef, I've put everything in the soup, and then I put my ladle in the soup and it is sakura soup. Senna, how else can we explain the lack of all the meat you have put in? Because inputs must give you some outputs. As for the story of free SHS, they go here, there, and everywhere. If you quantify the total free SHS budget, it's not more than 10 billion cedis. It's estimated up to 6 billion. That's what Oforiatta himself says. If you go to all the budget, you will see it. So how can 10 billion cedis account for 242 billion cedis worth of debt? Again, it doesn't make sense. 5% of it does. So even if you add that 5%, free SHS, add that 5%, go and take COVID, add 20 billion for COVID. You have total 30 billion. Remove it from the 242 billion they have increased. The other 210, where is it coming from? as for these factories, one district, one factory, we all know it is gimmick. How many factories, existing factories, have been repainted? Sana, what they do is they'll come to you and say, you've got a store, rebranded as a factory. We'll give you some more money to rebrand it, and we'll put it under the one district, one factory. There are many factories that were set up and existed at the time of the NDC that suddenly are under one district, one factory. If today, Sana, you set up a business and you do very, very well, next thing you see, they'll say 1D, 1F. In fact, I heard somebody ridiculously saying Ibrahim Mohammed's Jata Cement is courtesy of their one district, one factory project. And I laughed my lungs out. So all those stories, John Boydu himself knows. Why is Bawumia not answering? Why isn't John Boydu? Bawumia, who was supposed to be the whiz kid, economic whiz kid, who could tell us why all of this is happening, suddenly has diverted on secondment to the communication industry. And John Boydu and Co are all now struggling. They can't explain, because you cannot explain nothing. How do you explain the wind? We feel it, we know it. How are you going to explain it? So all that they were saying, Sana, even if you granted all of them and ask them to quantify them, it will go nowhere near 1/4 of the total amount of 242 billion that they have added to the debt since 2017, Sana.
Let me end with this quote from John Boydu's press conference yesterday. Quote, former President Mahama and Setekpe on public record has been the worst duo to have ever been in charge of the Ghanaian economy at the same time. That's Mahama, put the economy in a free fall after extremely reckless expenditure in excess of some 12 billion in pursuit of election victory in 2012. His economy under Setekpe never recovered, leading to unheard of taxation measures, including putting taxes on condoms and cutlasses. How do you respond to that?
So you see, this is again where these people specialize in lies. Putting taxes on condoms and cutlasses. Can they tell us when those taxes were removed? When were they put in and when were they removed? But for me, all this, we can credit John Boydu for not having an expertise in economics or economic management. So let's pardon him, because most of the things that Tegbe said, most of the things President Mahama said, he absolutely did not understand. But they just put him there because they've run out of communicators who are prepared to stick their necks for this. So they put their general secretary there to just come and blab anything. And we don't credit John Boydu with any fantastic economic analysis or understanding. But there's one simple thing, Sana. Let us accept that the NDC crippled the economy. The NDC wrecked the economy. And the fruits of that was a 3.4% GDP. He doomsaw and all the borrowing he claimed, right? 12 billion and all that stuff. The proof of that was an increase of our debt by a differential of, let's even say, 100 billion for the full 100 billion cedis for the full time NDC was in power. But we ended with 3.4% economic growth. This government that is supposed to be competent has not borrowed much. Surprisingly, had ended up taking the not borrowed much from 120 billion cedis to 344 billion. Now, this is the thing. The incompetent one gave you economic growth of 3.4%. You, the competent one, could only manage, after even giving us a recession, effectively, you could only manage 0.4% for 2020. Fortunately, 2016 was John Mohammed's fourth year, and 2020 was Nana Akufo-Addo's fourth year. So 4 years versus fourth year. The incompetent one you claim gave you 3.4%, and the competent one gave you 0.4%. Sana, this is simple. You have two sons. The one you claim is Zuku, doesn't know anything, is incompetent in class, comes with an A. He didn't get A+, he got an A. Your star guy with all the brains, all the intelligence, went to all the private schools, came back to you with a D-. Which of them do you then think is competent? You see, Ghanaians can see through all these lies. Apart from the numbers themselves, they don't talk about them anymore because they know that they only manage 0.4%, which was even a miracle. We missed negative growth by whiskers. So 0.4% versus 3.4%, if John Boydu can do the math, he should tell us who is better. If he can't do the math, he should use the calculator on his phone and do the subtraction and tell us which is better. It does not make sense, Senna, that he would claim that they did much, much better when all they got was 0.4% compared to 3.4% by John Mahama. In other words, what they got was barely 1.2% of what John Mahama achieved for 3.4%. Now, ask Ghanaians as well, the price of petrol at the pumps, it will tell you whether they are doing better or Mahama did better. Check the price then and the price now. I'll even go to the CD. They locked the CD up, and the CD now is galloping for 7 CDs to the dollar. Meanwhile, when we handed over, it was barely 3.944. So again, look at that metric. So the same exchange rate they were touting themselves in, they can't tout again. The price of fuel, the price of kenke, the price of a bag of cement, let's not even go there. They can't tout themselves on. And they were making noise about economic growth. Like John Mahama said yesterday, that 7%, 8% in 2017 was down to the work we did in bringing oil on stream. In fact, they did nothing. They inherited it. In fact, they didn't even have enough time to make an impact on 2017's economic growth. Because by mid-year, they were still putting their budget in place. So the real test now is what is the output. Don't say we borrowed less. Tell us how much you borrowed. Don't say our economic performance is better. Tell us how much your economic performance is versus what the NDCs is. And on all those scores, whether it's debt management, whether it's economic growth, whether it is the city's performance, the MPP comes last. The MPP comes last. So if John Boydu is listening, what he should start doing is get the people who were making noise about economic growth, Bawumia and his fellows, let them come out and talk, because what he's saying, he doesn't know what he's talking about. The facts don't bear him out, and sadly it appears he's just saying it for, I have to respond. So you hold a press conference and put lies out. But Ghanaians are now sophisticated. We can see the lies from the truth, Senna. And the truth of the matter is that on every single economic metric, every single economic score, the NDC under President John Mahama is head and shoulders way above this miserable and incompetent MPP government.